And we're waiting to see how the learners that are in institutions that are affected by the floods will be resettled and what solution will be found for them. It is also a day that the Finance Bill of 2024 is expected to be tabled before the House, and there is already an intention to reduce the publication period to 4 days, sort of to expedite the process of consideration of the bill. And also we're waiting for the report on the impeachment motion against Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi. It should be presented today, and actually a special sitting has been called to consider that decision by the Select Committee of 11 that the Daily Nation is reporting may have exonerated the Cabinet Secretary or let him off the hook. It is actually the main story there. MPs let Linturi off the hook in probe, and they are saying that a special committee of the National Assembly has cleared Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi of any wrongdoing in the scandal regarding the sale of fake fertilizer to farmers under the National Government Subsidy Program. A member of the committee who spoke to the Nation claimed MPs were carefully selected to save Linturi. You wonder what that exactly means, but so much more that is happening, and we'll be spending some time to reflect on that. I want us to begin by looking at the situation in the education sector, and you'll be listening to some of the voices that have been speaking about it. So eventually, 2 weeks later, that reopening is happening. Mheshimiwa Oloch, let me begin with you, because one of your constituencies was the worst hit, if you had to look at the totality of it in the country, with a lot of people displaced where they live, some schools destroyed, and now trying to clean up, rebuild. I don't know. How far is that going?
Yeah, thank you once again, Sam. I think as the schools reopen, I think it is important that we look back and see what is the state of preparedness. Speaking from my own constituency, I think we need to see what is the level of destruction. And one of the things that I have seen that the government needs to properly look at is the flood itself, the classrooms, and the state of how those classrooms are in terms of water that has entered the classroom. One particular school, I think Mathare Mixed Primary School, you still go there, you will find waters flooded in the school. You go to Valley Bridge Primary School, you'll find that the infrastructure, including the perimeter walls, have been destroyed. You go into majority of the schools, because of the drainage situations, you have the toilets, some of which are pit latrines, are still flooding with the waters. So this raises the question as to whether we are actually really prepared. Some of the camps were in schools, and you see that the schools have just relocated these people into makeshift camps in churches and in grounds. And so some of the things that we need to ask ourselves is, has the government put into place proper infrastructure? You see what happened, Sam, during the time of COVID. The government then of Uhuru Kenyatta put together what I think was the economic stimulus package. We rallied Parliament to come and put a supplementary budget. You saw the Minister for Education then putting up some of these school infrastructure funds to rebuild extra classes so that we could have spaces, social distancing, and all this. We have not seen a similar amount of rallying by government, and in fact the president came out to speak as the head of state. I think nearly 10 days after the incident itself. He came to Mathare, I think after almost 12 to 13 days of the days of flooding. So there has been not enough by government, and I'm not myself convinced that our children were ready to go to school. I have seen a circular issued that for some of the schools that are not prepared, they will stagger. Now, the statistics are not out there. How many schools are these? Where are they? How much help has been put together? And if they are going to be staggered, how will they cover their curriculum? I think there is some lack of coordination. Then let's speak also about CDF, because I've had people talk about let CDF use its emergency money. I think you will remember that this is the tail end of our financial year. a lot of your money in your constituencies and mine had already been committed in terms of emergency and where it will go. So there is need for us to reevaluate how, one, we respond to emergencies, two, how we rally and reorganize resources. We are going to supplementary too. We are going into another budget process. How do we reorganize in the face of floods like this? And lastly, I think there are gaps that we need to look at. I have seen a lot of response in terms of food, blankets, toiletries, and all this. But there is one thing that we need to look at in terms of the informal settlement, especially Mathare, Ruaraka, Embakasi West, I think Kibra and other constituencies. The government has come up with this thing about demolition of people who are living in the riparian land. And I, as a leader, one, will not say, let people live there, because, you know, there has been deaths that have been occasioned as a result of this. But I think we need to look at how do we move people with a human face. The government is moving people up to 30 meters of any riparian. We need to ourselves look at where are these people being taken? Yeah, where are they going to live? The government has spoken about some 10,000 shillings. What is the lowest amount of money that you can pay in any place where you go? You go to Kariobangi, you go to Kibra, you go to whatever place you are. What are you going to do with 10,000 shillings? To move alone, just to hire transport, to get a month's rent, let's put it at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. You have lost books, you have lost property, you have lost everything that you own. So when government says that they are going to give you 10,000 shillings, first, is it enough? When will it come? Where are you going? I think there is a problem with that. So in this process, I myself also looked at some of the gaps that we have, and one of those was an emerging medical crisis. A lot of these people are living in makeshift camps. And in the wake of this disaster, we have rallied together our partners, and this was an initiative that I came up with recently and launched a pay bill, so that we can be able to deal with some of those emerging issues of a medical nature. There are children, lactating mothers, single mothers, children, teenagers, all living together in squalid situation with little access to toilet. So that even if you're going to put people in a camp, right, there needs to be some level of dignity. And so we launched a fund which we're calling the Mathare Flood Disaster Fund. And I think it was run on Citizen here. The pay bill account number is 891300, and the account number is 9726. And part of the reason that we're doing this is that we are not seeing any government intervention in this area. And one other area in this medical assistant is counseling. I have people in my constituency, one mother that I met that lost 3 children. 3 children just disappeared like that with the waters. This kind of person needs counseling. You have a young boy by the name Bena, who was a very young entrepreneur in person, has lost a fleet of about 50 pigs, totally swept out, and the boy basically looks extremely depressed. These people, alongside others, need to be taken through a process of counseling to avoid depression and the consequences that go with these kind of things. I think these are the things myself, other than the people, the students whom we wish well in terms of their return to school, right, that we need to see so that they can transit and be moved and be resettled in a dignified manner.
You call it Mathare Floods?
It's called, and it was run, I think the pay bill ran here on Citizen and other media.
Right.
It's called the Mathare Flood Disaster Fund, and if you go to the pay bill, it's pay bill number 891300, and the account number is 9726, and we will use this to try.
So what I'm asking is, how much of resources are you targeting?
We are trying to target at least at the beginning maybe 10 million Kenya shillings. The main target is a medical camp, and luckily we have done medical camps before. Young entrepreneurs and doctors and volunteers who assisted us in my constituency 2 years back have come back together.
Okay.
But even as they do volunteer work, they will be need to marshal medicines, supplies, disposables, antibiotics to be able to deal with this. And we will need to get these volunteers, moved around and stuff like that, and facilities where we will be able to store this. So,
how many people are we talking about?
You see, Mathare, there were about 5,200 households. A lot of those households, people moved into neighbors, relatives within the constituency and outside the constituency. But remember, even as you live into people's houses, they will still need to have this kind of access to. But the physical people in the camps, we are talking, I think, the ones at Masinde would be close to about 800 or so households. I think there is another camp called Undugu Polytechnic. We are talking about another 300 households. And then you have Kosovo, Msedo, and Mathare 4B. So you're talking about 1,200 or so households that you're talking about that we need to deal with. I think if you multiply that by about 4, about 1,200 multiplied by 4, I think you're talking about close to about 6,000 people who are in dire need of emergency services. And I like to thank Red Cross, MSN, the Medical Sans Frontier, who are already doing some kind of intervention. But I think there is need to get the people to come, the public and people, stakeholders, to address this issue.
Honorable Kenan, so the announcement was that the president requesting the Constituency Development Fund committees to allocate resources for repair or rehabilitation of institutions. Is this the official policy that this is how it's supposed to happen, or there's another plan of getting resources?
First of all, this is a natural disaster. Nobody expected, though all indications were there all over the world, and early warning systems actually were given. These are the effects of global warming. And I thought, I really empathize, first of all, with my friend, Honorable Oloch, and the people of Mathare for the pain that they have gone through. For us, people of Northern Kenya, this is one thing that we have been going through over the years, since independence. And I'm sure now this will create a bit of empathy and understanding. When one part of this country is affected, everybody is affected. So I really say pole to the people of Mathare and many other Kenyans actually who have been affected by this. But then let's deal with two things: the effects of the floods and the post-flood planning by the government. It's a reality. Of course, the intensity of the flood has reduced, but the effects and the challenges actually caused on human lives, on health risks, on disruption of people, of communities, and many other things. So I think what Honorable Oloch has said is true, but I thought he will also include that, because I saw the president in his constituency the other day, and I think that must have elicited some support. I thought he will also appreciate the president and say, His Excellency the President was also there to really empathize with the people. And I'm sure that must have come with certain government services, because really we need not also to politicize every bit. These are natural things that has happened. Honorable Oloch, I know you're best, but I think let's also appreciate what different individuals actually do. That is with a light touch. But I think it's a reality also on the ground, because I saw the president on a gumboot going from one corner to the other, and I think that must have brought in some government relief or some government support service. That being the case, of course, I will not force you to appreciate his activities, because the other bit is the post-flood. It's true, we have a problem, a systemic planning problem. I think we need to revisit everything that we have been doing. You remember the other time when I was here, I made reference to what has happened between Garissa and Mondogo. That marshy area, once upon a time, nobody ever thought that the river Tana will extend its banks to Mondogo. Today, the whole of that area has turned into a laga. Meaning even the planning that was done during the colonial time for that bridge. I don't know whether you have ever been to Garissa.
Yes.
is no longer applicable. We were thinking of having another bridge just next to it, but right now some of the planners must go back to the drawing board now that everything has changed and come up with a sustainable planning, infrastructural planning that will take into account the current circumstances, but also deal with the future, because global warming actually is a reality. So on the issue raised by the use of emergency funds by the city, I think that's too minimal. Even if it's not even there, I agree with him. It's coming towards the tail end of the financial year. It has been used. It's a small percentage, actually, small percentage. So therefore, that is not there. And if it is there, I don't know whether it can do anything impactful. So it is high time that the government, in particular in the schools, because right now we are opening schools, and really the safety of students, the safety of parents, the psychological comfort of the parents, community harmony, these things are very important. So it's high time that, yes, we have delayed opening of schools just to minimize loss of lives and reduce risk. That is true. But equally, we must also be prepared now to deal with the state of our schools after the floods.
Is there anything that parliaments can do in this space? Because, I mean, you have the power of the purse to share resources.
Yes, I think there is the second supplementary. We'll see it's going on. We will see what that can really introduce. But I think generally speaking, it is the high time, because education is an equalizer. We need to deal with the issue of education after the floods. It's not something that actually we can assume, because you can imagine kids whose lives have been disrupted, and education is a cycle. So if they don't get the requisite educational program within this term, it means they will have missed something a lot in the education cycle. So I think it's something that parents,
so do I hear you saying that actually we don't have a solid plan on how to rebuild the destroyed schools?
You see, this was an emergency. It has just come. So everybody now must go back to the drawing board. The government, we, as part of the leadership, the elected leadership, we must all go back to the drawing board. It's not a government issue alone. It's all of us now. What I can do within CDF, even with the limited resources, of course, the emergency issue is gone. And we now need to start planning.
That's what I'm saying. You're saying that the emergency allocation for CDF, you don't even have it, meaning you don't even have resources to spend on that.
Yes, but you see, some of the things, you see, this has two components: emergency issues and long-term planning. The financial year is barely, I think, 2 months away. Less than a month, actually, less than 1.5 months, actually, let me say, end of June.
Yep.
So the next budget cycle, 2024-2025, has already commenced. So meaning we can plan for the emergency issues right now, temporarily, but also plan for the post-floods during the 2024-2025 budget cycle. But in the meantime, I think the government, what they have done is what I saw the Minister for Education and the Minister for ASAL and Infrastructure also doing, is to appeal to well-wishers, other well-wishers, the donor community and everybody else, to come and assist. That's what my friend here was alluding to. So I think once we put all our efforts together.
But Mheshimiwa Kenan, that cannot be our plan, that we appeal to our well-wishers. Taxes being collected on a daily basis.
It can be
part. It can be rerouted, can't it?
It's part of, you see, this country is being run by a government. Okay? And it has different components. We have what I can call the non-state actors. The non-state actors are part of our governance platform. So you can't say what, for example, Red Cross has done is not part of what officially or unofficially the Kenyan society expects. They are part of the non-state actors. So meaning what we get from Red Cross, the UN, and this can be assumed as part of efforts from the friendly non-state actors. But the government, the sole responsibility lies with government to declare this, to come up with a cogent, proper plan that will mitigate the effects of floods.
Which is clearly missing. Let's listen to the Cabinet Secretary for Education when he spoke on Thursday with some indication of what to do to recover the lost time.
To be able to open schools on Monday so that the normal running activity can be able to continue. It's only 2 weeks. We will be able to look at it, particularly those who are in Form 4, and see how we can be able to recover by probably extending a few days because they were expected to close down the schools in August for 3 weeks. So we might minimize the number of days that schools will be closed down in the month of August, so that whatever was supposed to be covered in the syllabus and the curriculum can be recovered during that particular time. Where there are rivers which will also pose a challenge passing through as they go to school, the respective communities and the port of management have also been informed to advise as appropriate, so that where there is danger, we can be able to have mitigating measures taken into consideration.
All right, so the Cabinet Secretary says a lot of things, including that there could be days added towards the end of the term, but there's a circular that came from Dr. Bello Kipsang, the PS Basic Education, saying, taking cognizance of the minimal disruption to the academic calendar, schools are advised to maintain the term dates and activities as earlier released, and they're supposed to develop lesson recovery plans to make up for the lost time due to the delays caused by flooding, ensuring that the curriculum is effectively covered within the academic year. But also, Ken, we might be here speaking and not realizing what exactly is happening. If you look at some of those pictures that we saw there, and you look at them some more, you're talking about schools that have lost classrooms, lost desks, lost learning materials, and learners are supposed to report today to study. And he says that the government has also appealed to well-wishers to support the response to this crisis. What should a responsible government do at such a time when the lives of children and, of course, the academic lives are also disrupted?
Well, this is an opportunity for deep soul searching. Indeed, particularly the candidates who are preparing for Form 4, this is a very decisive year. And incidentally, these are the same candidates who 4 years ago were caught up in the COVID pandemic. So I think it's also interesting to see what that would mean in terms of the lifelong effects on equalization, which education is supposed to achieve. From an economics perspective, education plays a big role in the economy. From today, you'll see a lot more activity taking place. So there is that sense that, even from an economics perspective, that the reopening couldn't have come sooner. But you're right, the state of infrastructure, as has been said, has been quite damaged. And we do hope that there will be a supplementary budget, an infrastructure bill that is brought together that is able to at least put together what you can call a small Marshall bill, a small Marshall plan, to be able to rebuild the roads, the schools, the facilities. And the question is, where will that money come from? How do we fund that? And of course, as we approach the finance bill 2024, infrastructure will play a big role, particularly in how those monies are raised. But I think the key part is, from a government's perspective, a responsible government should be able to sit down with the citizens to take stock of the damage and to start having short-term plans, medium-term plans, and long-term plans. Obviously, rebuilding big infrastructure projects is more of a medium-term to long-term. But I think the short-term plan is to ensure that the people who've been displaced, do they have adequate resources for the next 3 months? Is there a plan to make sure that their children don't fall behind? People who've lost textbooks, do they have ability to be able to recover that? So I think that's the most urgent situation. Then in the next 6 months, to think through, what are the big infrastructure projects that really have to be redone to be able to get the country back.
Okay, Mheshimiwa, you're right of reply. You're accused of not acknowledging the presence of the head of state in your constituency, but also your thoughts on this response that we now have to depend on resources we are not certain about, whether it's from well-wishers, whether it's from the CDF, which you say is exhausted. What then?
First of all, Kenan, I did say that there has been some intervention. Maybe I wasn't very specific. I appreciate, actually, if you look at my comments in the media, I say there's been a lot of government intervention. I acknowledge national government. I acknowledge the county government. Actually, CS Courier was sent by the president to come, I think, on day 4, and I appeared with him in my constituency. They brought about 3 tons or lorries of foodstuffs, I think, mattresses and other things, and we did work with him and did a lot of distribution. The fact that I have not mentioned the president in person is not for lack of appreciation. I think the only concern that I have was the delayed response and appearance by the president, which seems to have downplayed the effect. Number one, I think there are people who think that the president ought to have declared this a national disaster. Unless, of course, the president and the government did not think that this was a big enough crisis and was not a big enough disruption. And I think from The Economist, you can see there is a lot of disruption, not only on lives in terms of the loss of life, the delay and disruption on the schools. I think there is a lot of infrastructure. And again, Kenan, I think I need to mention this, which I have done. 8 bridges are now being reconstructed by Kura. They are footbridges that 2,000 to 3,000 people use on a daily basis, women going to markets to and fro in the morning, children. So they are now under reconstruction, and I have to appreciate that. But then I think, should the president have upscaled? If you're talking about alerts, this was a 5-star alert that ought to have, for example, invited the president, 1, to declare it a disaster, number 2, address the nation almost immediately, and now from a perspective of parliament, the president ought to have led from the front, and I keep using the COVID response. We immediately had, and I remember we were on recess because of social distancing and other things. We were recalled in the middle of all that, and we had to immediately pass a supplementary budget. I have not seen a similar response. Sam, today we are recalled to come and discuss this report by Linturi. And I would have thought in the order paper, apart from receiving and perhaps debating and passing or not passing that report, there ought to have been some response that would speak to the destruction of the school infrastructure. Kura perhaps has spent money that they would then need to come back and ratify under 2 to 3. I don't know, because these are not resources that they had. Instead, you have on the order paper the finance bill and other things that the government considers a priority. Right. So, yes, we appreciate what the government has done. I appreciate the president came. The president went to one of my wards and spoke to the question of affordable and social housing. We hope that they will engage us, because in that particular ward, if they apply this so-called 30 meters, this is a ward that will be wiped completely. Can you imagine in your constituency, if you have a whole ward that will be wiped? A whole ward, about 30,000 people in this village. So we expect that there will be stakeholder engagement. And the Supreme Court, I think, has spoken to questions like this, how you...
These are people who live along River Madare.
You see, the way that ward is, it's almost like an island in between Ruaraka and Utali on the other side and this side, yeah? What we thought were beacons that had been marked before were about 12 meters, and those beacons still exist, but they have come up with this arbitrary thing of 30 meters. 30 meters is about 100 feet on one side and 100 feet on the other side. The entire place is about 300 plus square feet, yeah? So you're going to talk about wiping out and removal of about 30,000, a population of 30,000. Madara is about 4 square kilometers, but very densely populated. So if you come up with this arbitrary 30 meters thing, you have to think about how you're going to administratively, completely undo a whole ward. Think about all the services that are given there. IBC has electoral units there. You have education structures there. You have everything. You just don't wake up and say you are going to apply this. So I expect that even as the president said that we are going to give priority to housing there, we need to know, are these people who pay 2,000 to 3,000 shillings for rent going to get proper initial allocation for these houses at the same rate that they used to. So we need to relook.
And has the land where social housing will be constructed been identified?
It has. There is a place there called Madare Depot where you have old houses that belonged to the police, the same way you have this railway housing that, you know, they're not very economically viable because you have a house that occupies space that you could build going up. And given that I have only 4 square meters, it only makes sense that you build up. So they occupy these police houses, and they are in very poor state anyway. So I agree that these houses need to be brought down. So the space is there, so they are going to demolish that area where the police are and get alternative place for the police.
And that is safe from the...
It is safe from, it is perhaps the 100 meters that would be left of that entire ward. The other 200 feet would go to 4B village and another Gitaduru village, and the only village that might survive is Kosovo, where the police depot is. So you're going to wipe an entire ward if you apply that principle. So stakeholder engagement and engagement of the leadership, and then the people that would be displaced, if they are displaced, where do they go temporarily? And after they go there, do they get back the initial prioritization to come? And then lastly on that issue, inadvertently what might happen, and this happened to my friend TJ Kajwang, I think sometimes back in Korogosho, when they did away with an entire, you end up reorganizing and redoing delimitations inadvertently when IEBC itself is supposed to come and do it. You will change the electoral patterns of an entire ward and an entire constituency.
Actually, I was going to ask you that because then it sounds like when the review is called, there is either wards or a constituency that may suffer.
Yes, I will already be 1 ward less. I will be having 5 instead of 6 by the time IEBC is doing delimitation if this is implemented.
Okay, all right. I want us to take a short break here on the break. When we come back, we'll be speaking about the situation with the finance bill of 2024. But remember, learners are expected to report back to school this morning, especially for day schools to begin their second term. They are 2 weeks late, but the government says, or the Ministry of Education says, that teachers are expected to find a way of incorporating everything that is supposed to be studied within the academic year within the same period. The Cabinet Secretary had said there would be extension of the term. There doesn't appear to be that plan, at least not what has been communicated so far by the Principal Secretary, Dr. Belio Kipsang. We'll come back with more on Finance Bill 2024.
Diapers come in various sizes and are designed to fit babies at different stages of growth. It's crucial to choose a